I think I didn't do anything wrong, just accepted a dinner invite that was good for my career. It happened to be our anniversary night, but my boss said it was an opportunity I shouldn't miss. Now my husband won't even sit at the same table as me, and I'm the one everyone's blaming. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Our anniversary fell on a Thursday that year, and I told myself it wasn't a big deal. We'd already celebrated plenty before. One missed dinner wouldn't matter. At least that's what I said when I called Noah from the office and told him I couldn't make it. He paused for a moment before answering. "You mean tonight?" he asked. I said, "Yes, but it's work, you know. Damien's taking the team out to celebrate the quarter. I can't skip it." He said only, "I already made reservations," and then the line went quiet. I remember sitting at my desk after that call, telling myself he'd understand. He always did. That was Noah's thing, steady, patient, never dramatic. He taught history at the local high school and thought life was about showing up and keeping promises. I used to find that comforting. Lately, it felt boring. Damien's invitation had come that morning. "Dinner tonight," he'd said during our meeting. "Just a few of us, nothing formal." He added, "You should come, Celeste. You've earned it." I knew what that meant. These dinners were where the real conversations happened, the kind that decided who got promoted. I wasn't going to miss that for another quiet evening with takeout and the same stories about his students. When I got home to change, Noah was in the kitchen setting the table, candles lit, wine already breathing. The smell of garlic butter filled the air. He'd made our first date meal, the one we used to joke about burning together. I froze for a moment, guilt flickering, then forced a smile. "Oh, wow," I said. "This looks amazing. But you didn't get my message?" He turned off the stove and said, "I got it." I put down my bag. "It's just one dinner, Noah. I can't say no to my boss. You know how these things work." He nodded once. "I know how priorities work." That annoyed me. "Don't make this a fight. It's my job. You of all people should understand responsibility." He looked at the 2 plates on the counter and said, "Enjoy your dinner." Then he walked out of the kitchen. I changed into a fitted dress, the kind Damien once said looked professional but powerful. Before leaving, I glanced at the dining table, 2 plates cooling under soft candlelight, wine untouched. I almost texted him an apology, but didn't want to sound guilty. Instead, I sent, "Don't wait up. I'll make it up later." The restaurant downtown was all glass and marble, full of executives laughing too loudly. Damien greeted me at the door with that grin he practiced for boardrooms. "There she is," he said, "the woman who made my quarter look good." The others clapped like it was some inside joke. I felt a rush of pride. Dinner went on for hours. Damien told stories about his early career, how he'd learned to take chances. Every time I laughed, he looked pleased, like he'd just proven a point. Someone ordered champagne, and when the glasses clinked, Damien raised his toward me. "To Celeste," he said, "the one who actually gets things done." Everyone cheered. I didn't notice my phone vibrating in my bag until dessert. 3 missed calls from Noah. I stared at the screen, wondering if I should step outside. Tessa, my coworker, leaned over and whispered, "Don't. He'll get over it. You're glowing right now." By the time I finally left, it was nearly midnight. The night air was heavy and warm. I texted Noah, "Heading home. Hope you're asleep. Love you." No reply. When I opened the front door, the candles were out, and the house smelled faintly of burnt butter. The dishes were gone. The table was bare, except for one thing. Our anniversary card from last year, propped up beside the empty wine glasses. His handwriting on the front read, "For the girl who always keeps me waiting, but is always worth it." I stood there holding it, heart thudding. Upstairs, the light from the bedroom door spilled faintly into the hall. I thought about going in, saying something clever to ease the tension, but I didn't. Instead, I sat on the couch scrolling through the photos from dinner. In one of them, Damien's hand rested lightly on my chair. I zoomed in, telling myself it looked completely professional. When I finally climbed into bed, Noah was facing the wall, his breathing slow and steady. I whispered, "Hey, I'm home." No response. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself everything was fine. He'd be quiet for a day or two, and then he'd soften. He always did. The next morning, he was up before me. Coffee brewed, Anna's lunch packed, shoes lined by the door. He moved around the kitchen like a ghost. When I said, "Good morning," he just nodded. I added, "You're not still mad, are you?" He looked up from tying Anna's shoes and said, "I'm not mad. I just learned something." I frowned. "Learned what?" He met my eyes, calm and unshaken. That I shouldn't wait for people who don't show up. I laughed lightly, pretending not to feel the sting. "Noah, stop being dramatic." He kissed Anna's head, picked up his bag, and said, "See you tonight." Like nothing was wrong. But I knew then that something had shifted. Not loud, not obvious, just a quiet crack beneath everything steady. When the door closed, I looked at the empty table again. The candles were still there, melted into small pools of wax. I almost cleaned them up but left them, thinking maybe he'd see that I noticed. Maybe that would be enough. It wasn't. A week later, I was back in the office pretending nothing had changed. Damien stopped by my desk with that charming grin of his, the one that made everyone sit up straighter. "Big client dinner Friday," he said. "You're on my short list." I nodded, pretending to be surprised. Inside, I felt that same thrill as before, being chosen. It was proof I mattered. When I told Noah that night, he didn't even look up from grading papers. "Another dinner?" he asked. "It's not like the last one," I said quickly. "This one's important. They're flying in the new regional team." He kept marking the papers, red pen moving steady. "You said that last time." I sighed. "Do you want me to stop growing just so you feel secure?" He didn't answer, just flipped a page. The silence made me snap. You could at least pretend to be supportive. He looked up then, his face unreadable. "You don't want support, Celeste. You want permission." That stung, but I laughed it off. "Fine. Don't wait up again." At work, things kept escalating. Damien started calling me into his office more often. Little brainstorming sessions that somehow stretched past regular hours. He'd pour a drink and talk about ambition like it was a religion. I liked the way he said my name, slow and deliberate, like I was already part of something bigger. Tessa noticed, of course. One afternoon she nudged me and whispered, "You realize he only calls you his secret weapon, right? He never says that about anyone else." I smiled. "Maybe that's because I actually get things done." She grinned. "Or maybe because you're his favorite." I didn't answer. I didn't want to admit how much that idea pleased me. Noah and I barely talked that week. He came home late from school events. I came home later from work functions. When I did see him, he was already in bed with a book open, pretending not to notice how much perfume still clung to my hair. One night he asked, "Do you even like being home anymore?" I said, "Of course I do. You're the one who's always distant." He stared at me for a long second, then said softly, "You used to come home smiling." That silence that followed, it felt like standing in a room with no air. Friday came fast. Damien held the dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the river. When I walked in, he smiled like he'd been waiting just for me. "You clean up well, Ward," he said, pulling out my chair. I laughed, trying to ignore how his hand brushed the back of mine. "Just doing my job." The night glowed with wine glasses and easy laughter. Damien leaned close whenever he spoke, his cologne strong, his compliments stronger. "You have that rare mix of brains and presence," he said. I told myself it was harmless, just office talk. When someone from accounting asked if I was married, I said yes, but my voice caught. Damien smirked like he'd noticed. Later, when the group left and it was just the two of us waiting for the valet, he said, "I hope your husband knows how lucky he is." I smiled, but it felt brittle. He doesn't really care about this stuff. Then he doesn't know what he has, Damien said. The words stayed with me long after I got home. Noah was still awake, sitting on the couch in the dark. The TV was on mute, the glow flickering across his face. "You didn't text," he said. "I was busy," I replied, slipping off my heels. He turned off the TV. "You said you'd be back by 10. It ran late. Big deal." He stood, calm as ever. "You keep saying that. Big deal. You missed our anniversary, now this. You always act like time doesn't matter unless it's yours." I rolled my eyes. I'm tired of feeling guilty for working hard. He nodded once, the kind of nod that meant he'd stopped arguing. "You win," he said quietly, and went upstairs. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and found a note on the counter. Taking Anna to Mom's for the weekend. No explanation, no kiss mark, just that. I told myself he was being childish. Still, when Saturday night came and I poured a glass of wine alone, I couldn't stop checking my phone. There were no texts from him, only one from Damien. "Great job last night. You're going places." I stared at it for too long before replying, "Thanks, I needed that." Tessa called the next day. "So, how's Noah after dinner number 2? She asked, teasing. "He'll survive," I said, forcing a laugh. "Careful," she said. "You sound like me before my divorce." "Please," I scoffed. "Noah's not going anywhere." But when I got home that evening, the framed photo from our wedding table was gone. Just a square of pale wall where it used to hang. I called his name, but the house answered with silence. He came home later, long after Anna's bedtime. I was waiting in the living room. "You took our picture down," I said. He shrugged. Didn't seem accurate anymore. My chest tightened. "You're being cruel." He looked at me with those calm, tired eyes. "No, I'm being honest. You'd call it a joke if I wasn't." I didn't know what to say. I turned away, muttering, "You always twist things." He picked up his keys again. "Good night, Celeste." I wanted to stop him, to make him stay and argue, but I just sat there listening to the door click shut. That night, lying in bed alone, I tried to tell myself I was doing the right thing, that this was what ambition looked like. Sacrifice, focus, independence. But deep down I felt something colder than guilt. It was the slow, sinking feeling that someone who used to wait for me wasn't waiting anymore. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to know what came next. By the end of summer, the distance between us had turned into a routine. Noah stopped asking when I'd be home, and I stopped pretending I cared. We shared the same space, but not the same air. He'd cook dinner for himself and Anna, wash the dishes, then disappear into the spare room to grade papers. I'd come in later, still dressed from work, and scroll through emails just loud enough to sound important. At first, I thought the silence would fade like it always did. But this time, it held. The easy laughter that used to fill our house was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of things unsaid. Even Anna noticed. One night she asked, "Mommy, why do you eat dinner with other people more than us?" I told her, "Because Mommy works hard so we can have nice things." She nodded but didn't look convinced. Later, I found a drawing she'd made at school. Our family, but I was drawn smaller, far away from the table. At work, though, I was glowing, or at least that's what people said. Damien started introducing me as our firm's future. He'd smile across meetings like we shared some private understanding. The attention felt like warmth after months of coldness. When Tessa teased, "Someone's getting promoted soon," I only half-joked back, maybe my marriage had to take one for the team. But the gossip had started. I overheard two assistants whispering near the coffee machine, my name and Damien's in the same sentence, their voices lowering when they saw me. I forced a laugh and said, "If I were sleeping my way up, I'd be higher by now." They giggled, awkwardly. Inside, I felt the sting of something I couldn't admit, that people were starting to see what I pretended wasn't there. That Friday, I got home past 10. Noah was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, the light dim, the same calm expression that unnerved me more than anger ever could. I set my bag down and said, "You're still up." He said, "You weren't going to tell me where you were?" I texted, "Work dinner." He nodded. "You texted busy. That's not the same thing." I sighed, tired of defending myself. "You're overreacting. Not everything's about you." He looked down at his cup. "That's the first true thing you've said in weeks." I didn't know how to answer that, so I just left the room. The next morning, his side of the closet looked emptier. Not gone, just thinner, like someone had started erasing us slowly. He still made breakfast for Anna, still smiled at her, but not at me. When I kissed her goodbye before work, she asked, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" I said yes, even though I already knew I wouldn't. That evening, Damien called. "Client meeting turned dinner," he said. "Need my best person there." I hesitated for half a second before saying, "Of course." We met at a hotel restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and glasses that looked too fragile to touch. The clients left early, leaving just the two of us at the table. Damien said, "You've been carrying this team." And I smiled. He added, "You don't get enough appreciation at home, do you?" I wanted to say something clever, but the question stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, "Noah's not really ambitious." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. That's always the story. The ones who stay small resent the ones who grow. It sounded reasonable in that moment, comforting even. But when I drove home, the words started to feel like poison. The house was dark when I got there. A note was taped to the door. Took Anna to Mom's. Needed space. I crumpled it and threw it on the counter. Inside, everything was too clean. The dishes done, floors swept, his mug washed and drying by the sink. I walked through each room, half expecting him to pop out, to argue, to say something. But he was gone. I called him twice. No answer. The third time, he sent a text. "We'll talk when you're ready to be honest." Honest about what? I hadn't done anything wrong. That's what I told myself as I poured wine and scrolled through my messages. One from Damien popped up. "Still thinking about our talk. You deserve more." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Maybe." The next morning, Elena, his mother, called. Her voice was sharp, controlled. "He's staying here for now," she said. "Anna, too." "What? Why?" "Because she doesn't need to watch her parents pretend they're fine." I tried to sound composed. "This is temporary. He's being dramatic." She sighed. "Noah doesn't do dramatic. He does permanent." That word, permanent, followed me all day. At the office, I could barely focus. Damien asked if I was okay, his hand brushing my shoulder. "Just tired," I said. But it wasn't tiredness. It was the beginning of realization, creeping in slow and quiet. When I got home, the house still felt hollow. I wandered into the kitchen and saw the marks on the wall where Anna's height had been measured. Small pencil lines, each with her name and a date. The last one was months old. I touched the spot and felt a heaviness I couldn't name. I told myself Noah was just trying to scare me, that he'd come back once I apologized. But when I went to our room, the drawers were empty, and on the bed sat a photo frame turned face down. I picked it up. It was from our first anniversary. We looked young, tired but happy. Behind it was a folded note in his handwriting. I stopped waiting hours ago. My knees almost gave out. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo. For years, I'd told myself that he'd always be there, that his patience was endless. I thought silence meant safety. But it didn't. It meant he'd been building his exit quietly, brick by brick. I stayed there for hours, still in my work clothes, phone buzzing on the nightstand. Another text from Damien. "Want to grab a drink? You look like you need one." I typed back, "Not tonight." Then I lay back and stared at the ceiling, realizing that for the first time in years, there was no one downstairs waiting for me, and maybe there never would be again. When people at work started noticing the change in me, I told them it was exhaustion. I said Noah had taken our daughter to stay with his mother because of a scheduling conflict. I smiled while saying it, pretending I was fine, but I could feel the walls closing in. Damien still acted friendly, but even he started keeping his office door open when I came in. He'd speak in that same warm tone, but his eyes flicked toward the hallway every few minutes, as if he wanted witnesses. Tessa caught on first. One morning, she leaned on my desk and whispered, "What's going on with you and Damien? He's acting cautious." I laughed like it was ridiculous. "Nothing's going on. Everyone just loves gossip." But the words came out sharper than I meant. She gave me that look, half pity, half warning, and walked away. I spent lunch scrolling through Noah's social media. He hadn't posted anything, but his mother had, a photo of him and Anna baking cookies, both smiling, both clean and calm. My chest tightened. I told myself they'd miss me soon. They always did. That night, I drove to Margot's, my mother's house. She answered the door in her robe, holding a glass of wine. "You look terrible," she said, then hugged me before I could speak. "He's still playing stubborn?" "He took Anna," I said. "And now he's ignoring me. Won't even talk." She shrugged. "He's just hurt. Men love pretending they're the ones who suffer." I wanted to believe her. "He says I humiliated him," I muttered. She waved it off. "You didn't cheat. You were networking. He's small-minded." Her certainty was comforting. It always had been. I stayed there the night, listening to her TV drone on in the background, half convincing myself that everything she said was true. The next morning, a message from HR was waiting in my inbox. "Please come by at 10 a.m. for a brief discussion." My stomach dropped. When I arrived, they were polite but distant. "We've received a few concerns regarding your professional relationship with Mr. Lowe," the HR director said. "We're not making accusations, just asking for clarity." I smiled, rehearsed and controlled. "Damien's my boss. We work closely. That's it." The director nodded but didn't look convinced. "Perception matters. I suggest keeping things strictly formal moving forward." When I walked out, Damien avoided my eyes. The next week, he stopped inviting me to meetings altogether. Back at Margot's, I tried to explain it to her. "They're overreacting. Someone must have complained." "Someone jealous, probably," she said, lighting another cigarette. "You're prettier than half the women there." "It's not about that," I said. "I think they think something's going on." "Well," she said, exhaling smoke, "let them think. You did nothing wrong." But I could hear doubt creeping into her voice. Days later, a courier came to the door. He handed me an envelope with my name printed cleanly across the front. I opened it before he even left the porch. Notice of separation. The words blurred together. At the bottom was Noah's signature, neat and steady. Margot looked over my shoulder. "Oh, please, he's bluffing." I shook my head. "He hired a lawyer." She frowned. "Over what? You didn't even do anything." I didn't answer. My throat hurt. That evening, I drove to his mother's house, the envelope still in my hand. Ruth answered the door, her expression hardening the moment she saw me. "I just want to talk to him," I said. "He's not here." "Then tell him to call me." She crossed her arms. "He doesn't owe you that." I blinked. "He's my husband." She looked at me for a long moment. Not for much longer. I felt heat rise in my face. You've never liked me. Because you've never liked anyone but yourself, she said quietly. You used him until he stopped being useful. Her words hit harder than I expected. I turned and walked away before she could see my eyes fill. When I got back to Mom's, she was on the phone with someone, probably gossiping about me. She hung up as soon as I entered. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. I think I lost him for real this time. She poured another glass of wine. You can fix it. Men always forgive eventually. Not him, I said, staring at the envelope in my hand. He's not angry. He's finished. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no quick line, no defense. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went online, scrolling through old photos, vacations, birthdays, that silly picture of us painting the living room. Every memory looked staged, like I'd been performing happiness instead of feeling it. I sent him a message anyway. Can we talk? Just once. It showed as delivered, but never read. Hours passed before my phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number. The message said, "Stop contacting him. Focus on the paperwork." It was from his lawyer. I dropped the phone on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The truth settled in slowly. He wasn't trying to hurt me anymore. He was removing me, efficiently, like a task on a checklist. In the morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My hair was unbrushed, my eyes dull. For years, I'd convinced myself I was the one in control, smart, confident, unstoppable. Now, all I saw was someone who mistook attention for power and silence for safety. Still, when Mom asked over breakfast, "What are you going to do now?" I smiled automatically and said, "Fix it." But even as I said it, I knew I couldn't. The courthouse smelled like cold air and coffee. I'd never been inside one before, not like this. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that we'd sort things out before it reached this point. But there I was, sitting on a hard bench beside Margot, who kept whispering that I looked too nervous. Across the room, Noah sat with his lawyer, calm as always. He didn't look at me. That was somehow worse than anger. When the clerk called our names, I stood, smoothing my jacket like it mattered. The judge greeted us politely, then began reading the summary of our case. His lawyer had written every word with surgical precision. Petitioner, Noah Ward. Grounds, neglect, abandonment, emotional cruelty. Hearing it aloud made me flinch. I wanted to interrupt, to say that wasn't fair, but my voice wouldn't come. His lawyer presented everything like a math problem. Emails showing how many times I'd canceled family plans, messages with Damien about late nights and hotel meetings. Nothing explicit, but enough to suggest the rest. He spoke softly, almost kindly, but every word landed like a hammer. Mr. Ward sought reconciliation multiple times, he said. Each attempt was dismissed as trivial. I finally found my voice. They're twisting everything. Those were work conversations. The judge looked at me. You'll have a chance to respond. When it was my turn, I stood and tried to sound calm. I worked hard. I provided for my family. Maybe I made mistakes, but I wasn't cruel. Noah's lawyer asked, "Would you say missing your 10th wedding anniversary for a non-mandatory dinner demonstrates commitment to your marriage?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He continued, "Would you describe these messages as professional?" He handed the judge a few printed screenshots. My stomach turned. They weren't bad, not really. Damien complimenting me replying with flattery. But out of context, they looked awful. "They're jokes," I said weakly. "Taken the wrong way." The lawyer nodded. "Jokes. Understood." He turned to Noah. "Mr. Ward, how many nights in the past 6 months did your wife return home after 10 p.m.? Noah answered without hesitation. "At least 4 nights a week." Margot squeezed my hand and whispered, "He's exaggerating." But I knew he wasn't. The lawyer moved to the next part, custody. Mr. Ward is requesting primary custody of the minor child, citing stability concerns. That snapped me out of my daze. No, I said. He can't take her from me. I'm her mother. The judge looked at me evenly. No one is taking anyone, Mrs. Ward. We're discussing what's best for the child. I turned to Noah, desperate. You can't do this. He met my eyes for the first time in weeks. I already did. Something in me cracked then. I felt it, like a sound only I could hear. I wanted to shout, to remind him of everything we'd been through, the late nights helping him grade papers, the years I'd kept us afloat when his salary barely covered the bills. But the words tangled in my throat. When the hearing ended, the judge said she'd review the final arrangements. The lawyers packed up their folders, all business. I just stood there, numb. Outside, the hallway was bright and empty. Noah walked past me without stopping. I caught his sleeve. Please, I whispered. Can we talk, alone? He turned slowly. His expression was calm, almost sad. You've had months to talk. You just never wanted to listen. I was trying to build something for us, I said. You were building something for yourself, he replied, and now you have it. He gently pulled his sleeve free and walked away. Margot came up behind me, muttering, He's heartless. But I barely heard her. I watched him disappear down the steps, sunlight hitting his shoulders, his stride steady. He looked lighter, as if walking away was the first real breath he'd taken in years. That night, I sat at Mom's kitchen table, the official papers spread in front of me. Margot poured more wine and kept saying we'd appeal, that no judge would side with him forever. But I wasn't listening. I stared at the line where his lawyer had written primary custody awarded to petitioner, visitation bi-weekly. The words blurred. When Mom finally went to bed, I opened my laptop and searched for photos of him and Anna. There were new ones on Ruth's account. Anna holding a science fair ribbon, Noah crouched beside her, smiling. The caption read, Proud Dad Moment. I scrolled further down and saw a comment from someone. Where's Mom? Ruth had replied simply, She's busy. I closed the laptop and buried my face in my hands. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge. For once I didn't feel angry or defensive, just hollow. Sometime after midnight my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Damien. I heard about the case. Are you okay? I stared at it for a long time. The old me would have answered instantly, grateful for the attention, but I didn't reply. I deleted the message and shut my phone off. Outside the window, the sky was starting to lighten, dawn, quiet and pale. I thought about Noah again, his calm voice, his steady hands, the way he used to wait for me without complaint. He wasn't waiting anymore. And for the first time, I understood that he didn't have to. I moved back into the house after the papers were finalized, though it barely felt like mine anymore. The walls were too quiet, the air too still. Half the furniture was gone. Noah had taken what he'd bought, and I couldn't even argue because I'd stopped keeping track of what belonged to who. The table where he used to wait for me sat empty, except for a thin line of sunlight crawling across the wood. Mom said I needed a fresh start. She brought over candles and new curtains, tried to fill the silence with advice. You're free now, she said. You can rebuild. Focus on yourself. But I didn't feel free. I felt like a guest in my own life, waiting for something that had already left. Weeks passed in fragments. Emails from work I didn't answer, bills I paid without reading, nights where I scrolled through photos of Anna until my phone died. When Noah dropped her off for weekends, he barely came to the door. He'd text, "She's here." Anna would hug me politely, then drift through the house like a visitor. Once, she pointed at the candlelit table and asked, "Are we celebrating something?" I said, "Just dinner." She nodded, uninterested, and went to her room. The distance between us scared me more than anything. I tried to win her back with gifts, new shoes, a tablet, but she looked at each one and said, "Thanks, Dad already got me that." I laughed it off, pretending not to flinch. When I tucked her in that night, I whispered, "You know Mommy loves you, right?" She said, "Uh-huh," eyes already closed. After she went back to Noah's, the house felt smaller. I started leaving the TV on just to fill the silence. I cooked too much food and threw half of it away. The more I tried to feel normal, the stranger everything seemed. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to clean out the closet. Buried in a box was the framed photo from our first anniversary, the one Noah used to keep on his desk. We were sitting on the hood of his old car, laughing, wind messing up my hair. I ran my thumb over the glass, wondering when exactly that version of us had stopped existing. Somewhere between ambition and pride, I'd traded that laughter for approval from people who barely remembered my name. Work didn't feel like salvation anymore. Damien barely spoke to me now. After the HR warning, his attention disappeared completely. When I passed him in the hallway, he'd nod politely, nothing more. It was strange how quickly admiration could turn into avoidance. The same colleagues who once called me the firm's future now avoided eye contact in the break room. I started eating lunch in my car, telling myself I liked the quiet. A month later, the company reorganized, and my name wasn't on any new project lists. When I asked HR about it, they said the team was streamlining leadership. I smiled and thanked them, but when I walked out of the building, my legs shook. I sat in the car for 10 minutes before I could even start the engine. That night, I drove to the small restaurant where Noah and I used to go every anniversary. It was still there, same chalkboard menu out front, same soft light spilling from the windows. Through the glass, I saw families laughing, couples leaning in close. I stood there for a minute before turning back to my car. The wind carried the smell of bread and garlic, familiar, painful. When I got home, I lit 2 candles on the table, just to see how it felt. The flicker cast soft shadows across the room, and for a moment, it almost looked the way it used to. I poured a glass of wine, set 2 plates even though I knew only one would be used. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was habit, muscle memory of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. I imagined him walking through the door, tired but smiling, saying something small like, "You actually waited this time." I pictured Anna sitting between us, giggling at our old jokes, but the only sound was the low hiss of the candle burning down. At some point my phone buzzed. It was a reminder, 1 year since marriage dissolution finalized. The legal phrasing hit like ice. Dissolution, as if love could just melt and vanish. I turned off the phone and sat in the dim light, tracing the rim of my glass. I whispered, mostly to myself, "I didn't mean to lose him." The words sounded childish, even to me. Then softer. "I just thought he'd always wait." The clock ticked past midnight. The candles had burned nearly to the end, the wax pooling into small circles on the table. I blew them out before they disappeared completely. The smoke curled upward, faint and gray, and for a brief moment it looked like the shape of something leaving. In the dark, I stayed seated, hands clasped, listening to the echo of silence fill the house again. I thought about that last dinner he made, the one I never showed up for, and how maybe that had been my real ending. Not the paperwork, not the court. Just that untouched table and the man who finally stopped waiting. I took a deep breath, steady but shaky, and said it out loud one last time. He didn't even wait this time. Then I sat back, eyes fixed on the fading smoke, the only thing left moving in the room. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.